I'm Chris Harrington, the 48-year-old son and fourth child of Carl, a corporate lawyer, and Mary, a nurse. An earthquake nearly destroyed our family home when, at the end of my junior year of high school, I announced that I didn't want to go to college. My usually talkative parents were stunned into silence at first, and then began to make my life miserable. After all, college was for the Harrington children. Mom and Dad applied to 6 very good colleges and universities behind my back. I was accepted into all of them, which added to the pressure from my entire family. Everyone except my paternal grandfather, Pop Harrington. I worked on holidays with my grandfather from the age of 13. Pops were flipping houses long before the term flipping was coined. He would buy a rundown house, usually owned by a long-retired couple, completely renovate and update it, and then sell it for a big profit. During the spring semester before my junior year in high school, Pops helped me buy 2 fixer-up houses. I spent the summer selecting contractors, electricians, plumbers, and painters and making sure the job was done right. 2 days before Labor Day, the unofficial end of summer, I sold my second home. While my friends spent the summer working for minimum wage, I split the profits with Pops and earned almost $8,000. Over the next summer, I sold 3 houses. Dad insisted that I find sources of financing myself, although he agreed to sign the bills. At the end of the summer, I gave Papa 25% of my profits. I was left with a wad of money that the average 17-year-old could choke on. Although I was an above-average student and enjoyed my studies, I knew college was not for me. I finally made a truce with Mom and Dad. We agreed that I would take the next year off after high school, but I would need to reapply to college, and we would decide as a family if I would go to college the following year. While my friends were working summer jobs and preparing for their first year of college, I bought a used Ford F-150 pickup with 123,000 miles, a primitive cell phone, and opened Harrington Construction. I contacted every real estate agent who would talk to me and explained which homes I was interested in. I committed to using them as my buying agent when I purchased the home they recommended, and as my selling agent when the renovations were completed. That's how I met the Kelly sisters. Jane and Mickey were agents in their early 20s and relatively new to the real estate industry after graduating from college. They were assistants at a local franchise of a leading national firm. I was in the middle of renovating 2 houses when I got the call. Hello? Chris, this is Mickey Kelly. I found a house in West Hartford that looks like it meets your needs. Don't want to watch? The biggest lesson I learned from Pops was urgency. If an opportunity presented itself, I had to be ready to take it. I agreed to meet Mickey in 90 minutes. The house was a modest ranch. According to my estimates, it was built about 50 years ago. Mickey told me that it belonged to the estate of an elderly couple. They lived in the house for almost 35 years. Their children lived on the West Coast and wanted to get rid of the house and deal with their inheritance as quickly as possible. The house was in excellent condition, but was very dilapidated and needed updating. How much do you think they'll take? I asked Mickey. I think it will go pretty quickly and the price will be close to $89. I suspected she was right. I offered $85,500 in cash. I need 5 days to complete the due diligence process, and I will close the deal within 5 days of the inspector's report if there are no problems. Mickey was delighted. We went back to her office, wrote up and signed an offer, and sent it to the listing agent. The offer was accepted, the inspector's report came back without any surprises, and a week later we closed the deal. Let's celebrate, Mickey suggested as we left the lawyer's office after the deal was completed. I live in the same apartment with my sister. It's less than 2 miles from here. Let's go have a drink. I followed Mickey to her beautifully decorated 3rd-floor apartment on the outskirts of West Hartford. She let me open a bottle of Merlot and poured 2 glasses. We made a toast in silence, and each took a sip. I hope you don't mind if we celebrate this occasion in a different way. Pops taught me a lot about real estate, including that female agents were often grateful to work with contractors who could buy and sell multiple houses in a year. He often said, If I were younger and not married to my grandmother, I would take full advantage of any bonus they offer. Mickey leaned over and kissed me on the lips. When she pulled away and saw the smile on my face, she leaned over again and repeated the kiss. It was a very aggressive kiss. Holding a glass of wine in one hand, I slid my hand down Mickey's back, felt her small, round, athletic ass, and pulled her towards me. We kissed and caressed each other. Despite my age, I have already had a fair amount of sexual experience. When I was in the back seat with my high school girlfriends, my first sex was awkward and ultimately unsatisfying. However, I became friends with 3 real estate agents, including a 43-year-old married woman who taught me most of my sexual skills. It was felt that Mickey also had good sexual experience, and therefore we had a great time and managed to give each other great pleasure. A few weeks ago, I met Mickey's sister Jane. We were looking at a 3-family home on the Hartford to Wethersfield line. Since 2 floors were rented out, it would be very difficult to quickly renovate the entire house. The price was great, but it was impossible to remodel the house quickly, and Jane and I knew it. We ended the tour on the empty 3rd floor. Jane apologized for wasting her time and then reached towards my crotch and asked, "Is there any way I can make amends?" Jane loved hard sex, and I gave it to her. The next 5 years flew by. When I showed my financial information to my parents after the first year, they agreed that I was doing very well. They were disappointed that I wasn't going to college, but they saw my passion for the real estate business. They supported me 100%. Since my second full year on the job, I have been renting anywhere from a dozen to 15 homes per year. I also actively looked for apartment buildings with 6 to 12 units. I renovated each unit as tenants moved out and held the properties for rental income. I quickly discovered that managing rental properties is a pain in the ass. Since I didn't want to get called at 3 in the morning about a broken toilet, I hired a property management company and let them take care of the rental property and all the problems that come with it. Mickey and Jane got married within 2 months of each other. I was invited to both weddings. I figured out dates, including a few threesomes with my sisters, were a thing of the past. I was pleasantly surprised when Jane called and asked if the girls could come to my apartment. I agreed, and 3 of us had sex. I was 24 years old when Mickey and Jen invited me to dinner with their husbands and their little sister. Kate had recently graduated from college and had been teaching at an elementary school in the Hartford area for a year. Kate went to school on a swimming scholarship and was stunningly beautiful. She was taller than her sisters at 5 feet 9 inches. She weighed 135 pounds and had red hair and green eyes. Her athletic physique was highlighted by long, toned legs and the most magnificent ass in the world. Even better than her looks was her personality. She was smart, sincere, and easy to laugh at. I had the pleasure of meeting her over drinks and dinner, even though we were with her sisters and their husbands. I was delighted when at the end of the evening she agreed to take me home to my parents. We were already approaching the Dunkin' Donuts store when Kate suggested we stop and talk, since this was the first time we were alone. After grabbing our drinks, we found a table where we could have some privacy. "Listen," Kate began. "You seem like a nice guy, and under different circumstances, I think I would like to get to know you better. I would also like to get to know you better. What's bothering you? I know you've been friends with my sisters for years, and I know they're sluts. I'm pretty sure they're cheating on their husbands. How does this affect you and me? I won't ask if you ever slept with any of them," Kate continued. "But if we are dating, even if we are not exclusive, you cannot date my sisters anymore." "We agreed," I replied. "You should also know that I'm not a slut. I'm far from a virgin, but I've only had sex with guys with whom I have exclusive relationships. That's not a lot of men." Kate and I started dating. The 4th time I asked her out, I invited her to my house for a private dinner. I was delighted when she agreed. I picked her up at her in-laws' house, and I think she was shocked when I pulled into the parking lot behind my house. I no longer lived in a condominium. Harrington's dad and grandma died within 3 weeks of each other 4 years ago. They were incredibly generous to their children and grandchildren, leaving behind a significant amount of property acquired during Dad's lifetime. I inherited their old farmhouse, barn, and 73 acres of land in a small rural town 20 minutes outside of Hartford. Fruit trees, fruit bushes, and vegetables grew on the site. The land was leased to a local farmer, and the rental income allowed me to maintain the farm without investing my own money. It took me almost a year to decide to renovate a 130-year-old farmhouse and barn, and another 2 years to complete the project. When everything was completed, I became the owner of a beautiful home. The outside was neat and retained the appearance of an old traditional farmhouse. Inside, everything was gutted and several walls were eliminated so that the house took on a modern, open look. I also renovated the barn. I poured a concrete floor and turned the barn into a huge garage and storage area. The back corner has been converted into a gym. The second floor hayloft was converted into a modern office and now housed Harrington Real Estate and Construction. Truth be told, the office was my man cave. There was only one employee in my company, me. I have bought, renovated, and either sold or rented out properties. I subcontracted all the renovation work, hiring real estate agents, lawyers, financiers, and accountants. I was one person. Kate was impressed when I gave her the big tour. I think she was also impressed by the lasagna, asparagus, and salad I served for dinner. We ate on my back patio, drank wine, and talked until the candles burned out. "Can I ask you something?" Kate nodded and replied, "Certainly. I like getting to know you, and I want to spend more time with you." Kate's smile brightened. "I don't want to date anyone but you. Maybe you'll consider an exclusive relationship." The smile slowly faded, and I was crushed when Kate said, "I need to think about this." Gradually, the smile returned. She laughed and said, "I thought about this long enough. It's time to ask." She jumped onto my lap and kissed me. It took almost 45 minutes to reach my double bed on the second floor of the house. All this time we slowly kissed, touched, and undressed each other. When we fell onto the mattress, hugging each other, I was the happiest person in the world. I admit, my only concern was that I would compare Kate to her slutty sisters and be disappointed in the quality of the sex. After a very tiring night that included sex and lovemaking, I knew I had found the right sister. She loved sex as much as her sisters, but wanted an exclusive relationship. Shortly after Kate and I got engaged, her father called and asked if we could meet for a beer. Her parents and I were friends, but we didn't quite get along. I knew the reason. I didn't have a college education. George and I met the next day, and as usual, he got straight to the point. "Chris, I like you. I really like you, but I think it's very important that you and Kate sign a prenuptial agreement. Have you already talked to Kate about this?" George replied, "Not yet, but I'm planning to." He handed a paper folder across the table and continued, "I asked my lawyer to draw it up." The prenuptial agreement was only 2 pages long and basically stated that if we divorced for any reason, Kate and I would keep all the property we brought into the marriage. Kate will retain all assets acquired in her current and future employment, and I will retain all assets of my business. If we have children, the court will determine all child support payments, and we will each be required to contribute $5,000 a year to the college fund. It seemed fair and quite simple. I told George, "I don't see any problem, but let me ask my lawyer to take a look at this. I will return it to you within a week." Kate and I got married at the end of her sophomore year and went on a 2-week honeymoon to several Caribbean islands. We conceived while on vacation, and Kayla was born 9 months after our wedding. Our second daughter, Cara, arrived 16 months later, followed by baby Carla 2.5 years later. Life was mostly good. In addition to her teaching responsibilities, Kate returned to school to earn a master's degree in education, as well as a certificate in school administration. It was a tough 3 years, and it always seemed like Kate and I were going in opposite directions. My business was going well. With the rise of the internet, I was able to change the direction of my company and moved out of the renovation industry into the real estate business. Instead, using access to information on the internet, I began searching for distressed vacation properties on the Northeast coast and in the ski areas of Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and upstate New York. Having found an attractive property and done the usual inspection, I would buy it and immediately sell it to someone who wanted to renovate it. In real estate, this type of transaction is known as a wholesale sale. Of course, I wasn't making that much money on each trade, but instead of doing 12 to 15 regular trades a year, I was making 75 to 100 wholesale trades. I continued to invest in residential apartments and currently own 18 buildings with a total of 124 units. Because my reputation in the industry was above average, I also became a partner in an investment group that lent money to sellers. It was one of the best companies of its kind in the Northeast. The most interesting thing about the change in direction of me and my companies is that the amount of time I worked every day has decreased. Instead of a 60-hour work week that involved moving from remodeling project to remodeling project and finding new projects, my new responsibilities required 20 to 30 hours a week. I was able to devote more valuable time to my family. The average working day consisted of getting up for 4 hours and training for an hour. Every morning I woke up my beloved wife and children to the smell of a hearty breakfast and prepared a healthy home-cooked lunch for them to take with them. I kissed my wife and kids goodbye and watched the kids board the school bus every morning. From 7:30 until 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I was busy with work. I talked to all the realtors I knew, looked for new wholesale deals, read our loan company reports, and did the 1,000 little details that were necessary in my job. More often than not, I was able to leave work early in the morning so I could get the kids ready for school. I coached their sports teams, took them to dance class, made sure they did their homework, and brought them home to a healthy home-cooked dinner. I was the happiest person in the world. I had a successful career and proudly wore the title Mr. Mom. During the same period of time, Kate changed her profession. She left the classroom and became a school administrator. She started as a middle school assistant principal, moved to an elementary school as a principal, then became a middle school assistant principal, and finally, in 6 short years, became the assistant superintendent of our school system. The biggest downside was that while my working hours were reduced, Kate's hours were increased. She had to attend numerous evening sporting events and other school events. She went to every city council and board of education meeting. However, Kate loved her job and the positive changes it was bringing to our city, so I didn't complain. Instead, I enjoyed working around the house. Even with our complicated lifestyle, Kate and I found time to be together, both in and out of the bedroom. After our 12th wedding anniversary, Kate and I were having sex 3 to 4 times a week. The only real test of our relationship began several years earlier, in the 3rd year of our marriage. Kate and I were sitting together celebrating Valentine's Day at our favorite local restaurant. We had just started dessert when Kate said, "I would like to ask you something, and I would like you to be open-minded." I admit that I was a little irritated by her words and tone, and I replied, "When was I open-minded with you?" Kate rolled her eyes and said, "I just think there's a small chance that you'll be upset." So, after making a reservation at our favorite restaurant and giving you a diamond pendant for Valentine's Day, you decided now was the time to talk about what might upset me. Great, go ahead. For God's sake, Chris, I told you there's a small chance you'll be upset. I waved my hand until Kate continued her tirade. Just tell me what you want to talk about. Kate looked at me for almost a minute and then continued. Mickey and Jane go on a 5-day cruise every spring. We chose a cruise during my school's spring break. I would like to go this year. I laughed and said, "Why should this upset me? This sounds like a great idea. Where are we going?" Kate's initial smile turned to concern as she replied, "No, you do not understand. We are planning a girls-only week." My gaze never left Kate's as I reached for my glass of wine and very slowly took 2 small sips. Putting the glass back on the table, I asked, "What exactly are you asking me?" Kate looked puzzled and replied, "I do not understand your question." You started this conversation by asking me if you could ask me a question. What's your question, Kate? What are you asking me? Kate pulled herself together and replied, Well, I guess I'm asking you, do you mind if I leave? I smiled broadly and replied, It's simple. No, I'm against you going, and I'm surprised you're asking. What's wrong with me leaving with my sisters? Kate was clearly annoyed. I was stunned. I shook my head and replied, As you well know, Mickey and Jane are sluts. They were sluts 5 years ago when we started dating, as you noted. They are still sluts today after each of them got divorced due to infidelity. Your sisters are homing torpedoes for men looking for sluts, and you know it. That's the thing if you go without me. So you don't trust me. This is not the issue we are discussing. You asked if I minded you going away, dancing, drinking, and lying around in a bikini on a week-long cruise with your slutty sisters. I am against it and will always be against it. Kate took a few moments to calm down before she said, You can't tell me I can't go. Again, honey, that's not what we're discussing. We're discussing my feelings about you leaving your family to go on vacation with your two slutty sisters. I wish you would stop calling them sluts. I shrugged and said, I wish they weren't sluts. Before we could continue, the waiter came to the table and asked if we liked dessert. When we agreed that it was very tasty, she said, The last dish is a glass of our premium plum wine. Can I bring it to you? Before Kate could agree, I said, No, thanks. I took my credit card out of my wallet, handed it to the waiter, and said, Please swipe your card, add 20% as a tip, and bring me the receipt for me to sign. Kate was outraged. She raised her voice and said, We'll stay for wine, and I told the waiter, and we'll take it right now. Thank you. I suspect the waiter knew that even though I had given my wife a beautiful pendant, I had no intention of having sex at the end of our date. I smiled at the waiter and said, Bring my wife her wine and my glass too. Once you have verified my card, return it to my wife and call her a taxi. The waiter's eyes almost popped out of his head when I threw the napkin on the table, stood up and headed to the dressing room to get my jacket. As I started the car, I looked at my watch and gave Kate exactly 3 minutes to pay the bill and get to the parking lot. She got there with 7 seconds to spare. She got into the car and was furious. Never put me in that position again. You understood me. I drove half a mile before I calmly answered. We just finished a conversation in which I was told that I can't stop you from going away for a week with your slutty sisters. And if so, then you cannot stop me from disgracing you in public, and I, damn it, will do it any time I want. Kate was stunned. I've never spoken to her like that before. She wisely decided to remain silent for the rest of our trip. I parked the car at the barn. While Kate walked towards the door leading outside and into the house, I walked up the stairs to my office. Where are you going? We haven't finished talking yet. Go to the house now. I was halfway up the stairs. I turned and shouted, Who the hell are you talking to? Never tell me what to do again. Kate stood there with her jaw open as I slammed the office door behind me. Over the next few weeks, the temperature in our house ranged from freezing to Arctic cold. Depending on the temperature, I spent many nights sleeping in my office. 4 days before Kate was due to leave, she cornered me in my office. Can we talk? She asked. Certainly. I pointed to the chair and said, Please, have a seat. Kate looked at me for quite a long time before saying, I don't want to leave when you're mad at me. I shrugged and said, There is a simple way to change my mood. Chris, I'm going on a cruise. This is final. We sat in silence for a few moments, and then I asked, Can I say a few words? After Kate nodded in agreement, I told her, For the first time in our entire life together, I'm worried about the health of our marriage. For the first time, I'm worried that your actions might cause our family to fall apart. It's not fair, Chris. Do you really think I'm going to have sex with some guy on a cruise? Sitting here now, I know that you are not thinking about cheating on me. But in a few days, you will be with your sisters, drinking and having fun. 3 gorgeous women in such an environment will attract men, and this can easily lead to unforeseen consequences, especially if two of them are sluts. Kate, you know I'm right. I saw that Kate was preparing her answer and was taken by surprise when I insisted that she knew I was right. She had the decency to blush. I continued, you have to understand that I care about a lot of things, not just sex. Are you going to kiss men? Will you hold hands? How about slow dancing with his hands on your butt, or letting a man apply sunblock to your body while you lie by the pool? Chris, you're just ridiculous. I don't plan to do any of this, but even if it happens, it won't be that bad. I think my smile unnerved Kate. I asked, why don't you plan to do any of this? Why? Because a married woman should not enter into such a relationship with a man. But just because a drunken mistake has occurred, this in no way means that it should lead to divorce. I shook my head and said, we keep going in the same stupid circle. You didn't take into account my very strong feelings and concerns about this trip. If I find out that you behaved inappropriately, I will not consider your feelings. I will do what is best for me and my daughters, including divorce. I can't believe you're talking about divorce. And I can't believe that your decision to go on this vacation led to us talking about divorce. Listen, I continued, I have come to terms with the fact that you will go on this trip. I don't like it, of course, but I accept it. I hope you and your sisters have a nice time, but I want you to understand my concerns and know, absolutely, if you cross the line and do something inappropriate and I find out about it, I will kick you to the curb in a second. I was surprised when tears poured from Kate's eyes and rolled down her cheeks. She jumped up from her seat, walked to the door of my office, and shouted over her shoulder, I'm not going to do anything bad. On the morning of Kate's departure, we sat at the kitchen table. The leftover waffle breakfast was the only evidence of our delicious meal. Kate asked the girls about their plans for the week. When the kitchen clock struck 8 in the morning, Kate looked at me and said, it's time for us to go. I told Mickey we'd pick her up at 8:30 and Jane at 9. I asked. Certainly. You will take us to the airport. Kate, I have conference calls scheduled at 8:30, 9 and 9:45. I'm going to my office. What the hell is happening to you? What kind of husband doesn't take his wife to the airport? I was halfway to the door to the kitchen when I answered. The kind of husband who will not support this vacation in any way. And then, turning to the girls, he told them, please clear the table and kitchen counter before turning on the TV. The next 9 years flew by. Kayla had just turned 13, Cara was 11, and Carlo was 8. I still enjoyed being Mr. Penn mom and being responsible for the kids. Kate appreciated my efforts because it allowed her to remain a top administrator in our city's school system, as well as hold positions on several Connecticut state and national boards of education. I was incredibly proud of my wife and at the same time enjoyed the close bond I had with my 3 daughters. It was a Friday afternoon in the last full week of April. Kate had returned 2 weeks earlier from her 9th spring cruise with her sisters. My phone was off, and I was listening to the conference call. I didn't intend to participate in the conversation. Just listen. I was standing by the open office window, enjoying the warm spring breeze, when Kate's car pulled into the driveway. Her sister Jane's car followed her. Kate jumped out of her car, and Jane and Mickey got out of the other. I heard Jane ask, what's so important? Kate shushed her sister and said, let's talk in the kitchen. I don't want to risk Chris hearing us. Looks like this is more important than my conference call, I thought, turning off the phone. Almost immediately, I launched the home security app on my cell phone and navigated to the camera in our kitchen. I watched as the women entered through the back door. As Mickey and Jane took their places at our table, Kate poured the sisters 2 glasses of wine. Won't you? Asked Mickey. After a pause, Kate replied, I cannot now. I'm taking antibiotics. What's wrong with you? Asked Jane. I can't believe it, but one of the assholes I slept with gave me gonorrhea, Kate admitted. Oh shit, Jane said. You infected Chris. No, Kate screamed. He always gets angry when I return from a cruise. We return to sex only after a couple of weeks. When will your doctor tell Chris? Mickey asked. I don't think he will report. I went to a clinic in Albany, New York, and paid cash. I told them that I was single, and for the last 6 months, I had only had sex on a cruise with strangers. I had to give the clinic information about our cruise line and the names of the guys I slept with. The medical authorities will try to track down whoever gave this to me. I didn't listen to anything else and turned off the application. I walked over to the bookshelf, opened a bottle of Knob Creek, and poured an inch. As I sat down at my desk and took a healthy sip, I realized that I had been preparing for this moment for a decade and had already thought through all the steps necessary to end Kate and my marriage. I was sad. I almost died inside, but I was determined to take care of myself and my children. I called my personal lawyer and asked him to file for divorce. I wanted the marriage contract to be fulfilled. I needed the house that I inherited from my grandfather. Most importantly, as the primary caregiver, I insisted on full custody of my girls. My lawyer agreed that custody should not be an issue. I have instructed my attorney to file for divorce due to irreconcilable differences, but to prepare a second petition for divorce citing infidelity. I didn't worry about dividing our bank accounts. Early on, my lawyer advised Kate and I to have separate accounts in case my business failed. Each of us made equal quarterly contributions to the family budget, but we conducted all other finances in our own name. I canceled 2 joint credit cards and paid off the balance using our household budget account. 30 minutes after I heard this fateful conversation, I took the rest of my drink and headed to the kitchen. The girls' conversation died down when I appeared at the door. Kate looked at me and asked, "Bad day, honey?" I sat down in my seat at the far end of the kitchen table, nodded, and said, "Yes, very bad." The group was watching with interest when Kate asked, "Would you like to tell us about it?" As I was contemplating my answer, we heard Kayla come through the front door. Her best friend's mom drove her home from high school. Kayla ran into the kitchen, hugged her mom and her aunties, and then came around the table and wrapped her arms around my neck. Kayla hasn't seen her aunts since they left on their last cruise. Kayla told her aunts about her school and sports activities. They teased her about the boy who was in love with her. I looked around the table and everyone except Kate was deep in conversation. Kate looked at me with a worried expression on her face. A few minutes later, we heard a school bus stop in front of the house, and shortly after that the front door slammed open. A few seconds later, Cara and Carla ran into the kitchen. After another round of hugs, Mickey and Jane began asking their 3 nieces about their recent lives. We all laughed and chatted together for over an hour. When it became quiet, and I suspected that Jane and Mickey would find an excuse to leave, I said, "I'm calling a family meeting." And then, looking at my daughters-in-law, I said, "Each of you will be affected by our conversation. I invite you to stay." When they agreed, I stood up, filled their glasses with wine, and poured myself another inch of bourbon. Setting the glasses back on the table, I asked Kate, "Would you like some wine?" Kate smiled, shook her head, and replied, "No, thank you." Cara laughed and said, "Wow, Mom doesn't want a glass of wine on a Friday afternoon. And for what reason?" We all laughed and let Kate answer. "I had a little too much on the cruise. I'm trying to lose a few kilos." "It makes me happy," I said. "What relief?" Kate asked. Kate's face went white as I answered, "I thought you weren't drinking because you were prescribed antibiotics." The girls turned to Kate and Carla asked, "Are you sick, Mom?" Kate quickly replied, "No, of course not." Everyone turned to me. I took 2 breaths to calm myself and turned to my girls. I told them, "Your mother just lied to you." "Chris," Kate screamed, "your mother takes antibiotics for a disease called gonorrhea. It's a sexually transmitted disease." A sexually transmitted disease. Your mom contracted gonorrhea when she cheated on me while on a cruise with her sisters. Girls, your father is lying. "Go to your room immediately," Kate ordered. No one moved, only the girls' heads turned in my direction. I took my time and slowly said to my girls, "I'm sure you know deep down that I would never lie to you about something so important. Go to your rooms." Now, like a tennis match, 3 little heads turned from Kate to look at me. Girls, you should know that I contacted Mr. Phillips. You know he's my lawyer. He will prepare the divorce papers this weekend. He'll make sure Mom gets a copy next week. Kate's eyes flashed with rage. How dare you interfere with our children in this personal matter? Looking at Kate with as much contempt as possible, I replied, Ellen will file for divorce on Tuesday. Our private case will become public in just a few days. And then, looking at my daughters, I told them, next year will be very difficult for our family. I want to treat you with respect and tell you the truth from the beginning. I want you to know that it's not my fault. It's all because of your mother. She cheated on us. She destroyed our marriage and split our family. Watching my daughter's reactions, I was not surprised by Cara and Carla's tears and sobs. I was surprised by my oldest girl's lack of emotion. She looked determined as she asked, Dad, I want to tell you something important, but I'm afraid that you will hate me. I walked around my sister-in-law Jane and took Kayla's hand in mine. Hating you is impossible. I was confused when Kayla burst into tears. She turned and looked at Cara. When Cara nodded in silent agreement, both girls hugged and cried together. Look at the mess you made. How dare you upset our family like that? I watched Kayla and Cara closely as Kate spoke. Her words had no effect on the girls. Instead, Kayla calmed down and said, 2 years ago, when Mom returned from a cruise, she was sitting here with Aunt Jane and Aunt Mickey. We were upstairs in Cara's bedroom. Kayla pointed overhead to Cara's room and continued. I heard Mom, Aunt Jane, and Aunt Mickey talking through the ventilation. They laughed and bragged about who had the most sex during the cruise. They described some very vile things that I remember word for word, but do not want to repeat. I remember everything too, Dad, Cara picked up. Dad, I answered. Yes, Kayla. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I'm sorry too, Dad, Cara said. Kayla continued. We know that Mom did very badly, but we were afraid to tell you. I continued to hold Kayla's hand and reached out to Cara. Little Carla did not understand everything that was happening, but did not want to remain on the sidelines. She moved closer to Cara and joined them. I told all 3 girls, you don't need to be sorry. Your mother and aunts should not have put you in this position of having to hear about their disgusting behavior. It's their fault, not yours. I won't live with my mother after the divorce. I want to live with you. I was surprised that Kayla had gone that far with her thoughts. I was happy and proud when Carla and Cara nodded in agreement. Kate decided to take a moment to continue her stupidity. She stated, in a divorce, the mother always gets custody. If your dad doesn't stop this nonsense immediately, you will live with me. I guarantee it. All 3 girls looked upset and turned to me. I smiled and explained. In most cases, the mother receives primary custody. Kayla groaned until she saw me raise my hand. I continued. They receive custody because in most cases, the mother is the main caregiver. Let me ask you a few questions. You don't have to answer out loud. The girls nodded for me to continue. Who cooks breakfast for you every day? Who packs your lunch for school and cooks dinner? Who goes grocery shopping every week? Who stays home with you every evening while your mom is in a meeting? Who takes you to the doctor for your annual checkup or when you're sick? Who coaches your sports teams and volunteers to chaperone school trips? Who takes you to dance classes and theater rehearsals? After that, I asked, can you remember one thing that your mother does regularly to contribute to our family? Kayla jumped up from her seat, walked around the table, and jumped into my outstretched arms. It's you, Dad. You are our nurse and the best dad in the world. When Kayla finished, her 2 sisters joined us in a huge group hug. I waited a minute until we calmed down. Go to your rooms, girls. My mom and my aunts need to talk. I received 3 juicy kisses on the cheek. The girls ignored Kate, Jane, and Mickey as they walked out of the kitchen. They were already leaving the kitchen when I ordered. Girls, I don't want you to eavesdrop. Please go to Carla's room. Given the emotional nature of the situation, I was pleased to hear 3 chuckles and a chorus of, okay, Dad. Looks like you won, I said to Mickey and Jane. I saw that they did not want to answer, but I forced them. What do you mean? Mickey asked. I wanted a faithful and loving wife, and you wanted Kate to be a slut. You won. Mickey had the decency to groan. I'm not a slut, Chris, I laughed and replied. Your venereal disease is proof that you are a slut. Stop it. Please act like an adult. We don't need vulgar language. Jane jumped up and explained. It was only 1 week a year, Chris. Kate has a stressful job and relaxes while we're away. There's nothing wrong with that. I couldn't help myself and said, if I wanted a slut for a wife, I would marry you or Mickey. Fuck you, Chris, Mickey continued. You never complained when you had sex with us. The sisters nodded in agreement. Let's get a look. I was 19, horny and lonely. I waited a moment before asking. Once you introduced me to Kate, did I accept any of your many invitations to continue having sex with you? Everyone at the table knew the answer. Nobody said a word. I don't want a divorce. I will fight to save our family. Fortunately, Kate, I don't need your permission to divorce. I ordered the divorce to take place on the basis of irreconcilable differences. If you resist, I will ask the court to order that you be tested for sexually transmitted diseases. I think the test results will prove that you are a cheater. Then I will change the terms to infidelity, and the whole world will know that you are a lying liar. Hey, little sister, Jen intervened. We're going to get out of here and give you two some alone time. Both sisters started to get up, but stopped when I said, while you're leaving, I want you to take out the trash. They looked at me with confusion until I pointed at Kate and told them, take your sister to her room and ask her to pack enough things for several weeks, and then take her from my house. Although Kate tried to use family and friends to delay the divorce, she did not use official channels because she did not want the whole world to know that she was a slut. The mandatory consultation ordered by the court lasted only 1 session. The counselor had no trouble determining that I was not interested in continuing my marriage to Kate. The court accepted the marriage contract. Kate kept all the assets associated with her work, and I kept my business. Best of all, I received primary custody of Kayla, Cara, and Carla. My 2 oldest daughters continued to feud with their mother and aunts, but remained close to their maternal grandparents. My youngest, Carla, is still close to her mother and sees her regularly. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one. Listening to the next one. Listening to the